Another thing that I wanted to share about meditating and the meditation that begins after the third initiation is that once one starts to go into this state and lives a state without duality, because the separative self creates the duality, because it's always projecting, has identification with the past as me and the ego, and the basis of that projecting into a future, which is also, and I will be happy if I do this or that, but never in the moment. You heard of Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, which is basically pointing to this, that most of us are always projecting and trying to become, always trying to become. And then we are in the process of becoming, we are created the experiencer and the experience. The third initiation, one starts to go into real meditation and go into a state where experiencer and experience merge, because the projection comes to an end. At the third initiation, the separative mind just becomes like a point of reference only. It doesn't, it has lost all its reactions. It's not a reactive mind anymore. It's still there, duality is still there. And also, the path as a struggle, doing this sadhana or this effort to become better and all that, comes to an end. Because from that moment onward, it's only meditation that leads further, and the next goal of the inner man on the path is the end of the mind. The reactive mind is already ended, but the mind is still there as a duality. And at the fourth initiation, which according to esoteric teachings is full God realization. It's a state that after that the reincarnation ends, duality ends, and causal body, which is you can also call the reincarnating soul, is no longer needed, because all the middle ground of thinking, becoming, improving, reincarnating to improve, and the goal, the outer and inner become one. The experiencer and experience become one. The observer and the observed become one. In actual sense. And that is a state of continuous, uninterrupted meditation. You've heard the word samadhi. Samadhi is from two words, sama and buddhi. Sama means equal, and buddhi is the higher mind. Equal-mindedness in the higher mind. Equal-mindedness meaning there's nothing that can affect you. There's nothing that can disturb you. You have reached a state of being above praise and blame and joy and sorrow as human joy and sorrow. You have come to a state of a constant. That is a state of pure being. That anything you do within that state is not a process of becoming. It's just a movement of being. It's just a constant flowering of being. When the Theosophical Society came at the end of the 19th century, they, for the first time, as far as I know, talked about a path beyond God realization. And that is because the masters, the master teachers, the hierarchy that guides our planet, had not seen it possible that man would understand the path beyond that. The mind of man had come to that point that they could understand, begin to understand, even if it's mentally, not with full deep realization, but just to understand that there is a path beyond beyond God realization. I had shared one of the last talks about a Sufi teacher once telling me that all mankind is engaged in the business of 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. I'm this, I should become that. And even it goes on in the spiritual realm, you know. I will improve and I will become better and I will become more spiritual and all that. Which is surely is still within the ego and the reactive mind. It may create a certain kind of ripening, but essentially it's still within the reactive mind. So the Sufi teacher shared with me that life really begins at the zero, when all movements of the reactive mind have come to an end. When you do not have any recognition of yourself as a separated entity. When you have come to a state of perfect peace in yourself, and you begin to abide in that peace. It's hard. It's really hard to imagine perfect peace. It's as hard to accept perfect peace. And I shared this story before. You know about the story of the two wolves, like the American Indian story, where the elder teaches that, you know, there'll be perfect peace if you only feed one of the wolves. There's a black wolf and the white wolf fighting in you, and when the white wolf wins, then you have perfect peace. When we are on the path, we do start feeding the white wolf. But when the black wolf is just about to die, unless we have really come to a point of understanding and accepting perfect peace as ourself. We're going to just quickly feed the black wolf a little more, because we're not ready to let go of the fighting as our identification. It's death. And so we really, as the meditation really builds, and we're really ready to let go of even the last shred, the tiniest movement of the reactive mind, its last final movements, and really accept perfect peace, which is the death of the reactive mind, which is the death of the ego, which is the death of all we have known to be ourselves, which is not easy, because it's letting go of all that we know. The known is our identification. And we hold on to the known. It's not the fear of the unknown, as teachers have pointed out, because you cannot fear what you don't know. It's really the letting go of the known. It's the identification with the physical body as ourself, which is a carryover from the animal. That protectiveness, that security, that need for security is in the animal physical body. And it spills over in the area of the mind as the ego, with all its need of security, the need for acceptance, and all its other psychological needs. And the whole journey of the spiritual life is gaining an understanding of the separated mind, coming upon acceptance of perfect peace as yourself, that gives birth to a self that is other than the separated reactive mind, a self that abides in meditation. Before we go on to do a meditative exercise, is there anything you want to discuss and go a little bit into?
You had spoken of control of the emotions. Can you address the distinction, if there is one, between control and mastery?
Everybody hear the question?
You know, it's I get that question a lot, and I need to reform my vocabulary because what is acceptable to me may not be acceptable to you, and there is huge issue with the using of the word control, because somehow it reminds one of the ego, because the ego is so controlling, you know. Mastery is a better word.
Well, I guess my issue was that there was a certain duality implicit in the nature of in the definition of the word
note
control.
that anytime you start to talk about pointing to things away from the separative, reactive mind outside of, there will be issues with the vocabulary because a new vocabulary has to come out of
Emergence.
this path. And so these are just words or pegs to hang our advanced, enlightened ideas on.
Gotcha.
I think it could just be added that it's not, the word control might be bringing up the idea that you're still in the arm wrestling match.
Right.
So just showing that it's under control, but you're not getting energy to keep it under control. Maybe it's just better to kind of explain it from that perspective as well, that you're not in this match to keep it under control. You've come to a point where it just is under control.
Right. Do you understand that, right?
I believe so,
And but we have so much association as ego trying to control that I do get that a lot. But I'll tell you why I use the word control, and that's because many of the earlier theosophical books, they have used that word in reference to the mastery
Mhm.
of the emotional body.
Okay,
So.
gotcha. Thank you.
And about when you were talking about kind of the purpose of meditation and how a problem that we have as humans is we always want 1 + 1 + 1,
Right?
and that +1 is a problem. It kind of makes me think that if I say that +1 is a problem, then that might stop me from trying to be better. It might stop me from doing better at my workout tomorrow than I did from today. If I don't want that +1, then how can I be better if I don't want that extra 1?
That may be all very well on the purely physical plane, on place on work, but with your essential being and happiness, it won't work. The 1 + 1 won't work.
Well, when, just, I guess, continuing the same metaphor, when I am able to run faster today than I ran yesterday, that legitimately does make me internally happy.
That's true. But again, it's within the context of purely physical activity. It's fine. There is such a thing. You know, you improve. As I mentioned about meditation, as a meditative exercise, the practice improves daily. Remember, I said 990 one day, 900 the next day, and so on. But in terms of your essential self, your happiness, your true happiness, you have to go out of that. What is the ACIM uses a term as far as that particular mind that creates gradations and all that. There's a term that ACIM uses, right? So it's really a question. Really have to ask yourself whether that can apply to your self, to your psychological self. Can you really apply that? And the teachers say that you cannot. You have to come out of that dynamic. You have to come out of that process of me, my happiness dependent on this something external at all. It's an internal state that is complete.
Right, done as a practice of mastery, right? Any physical practice, done as a practice of mastery.
Yeah.
Again, not as of control, but of mastery, it takes on a different hue. You don't lose your peace if you don't attain a specific physical state.
Right. And also, if you recall what I just said about up to the third initiation, you can struggle. It's okay. You struggle. But after the third initiation, the reactive mind has ended, and the struggle ends. But because the struggle is related to the me. And the person you're referring to, who's happy because that's still within the reactive mind. The person outside of the reactive mind is not dependent on anything for his happiness. When you said that, gave that example, that person is within the reactive mind. Person outside the reactive mind has no conditions, is unperturbed, is undisturbed. There's nothing that can affect the peace of that person.
Can you expand on, because what she was saying too, I think was a concern that comes up in this, is the idea of where would my motivation to better myself come from? So can you talk about when you act from that state of extending yourself from being as a third, can you talk about how there's so much power in what is actually the catalyst for every action that you take in a given moment, in a given day, as compared to before you reach that state, you're constantly thinking of what bettering is, the concept of bettering is.
Did you understand that?
Mm-hmm.
So it's to understand that there is that the goal is this whole thing of psychologically improving, becoming better. If you come to that state of the non-reactive mind, and you start to meditate, it's a whole different quality of life and creativity that is not to do with thought. It's not to do with fragmentary thinking. It's a movement of wholeness. Before that, it's all within thinking and the fragmentary mind.
And it's not addition of 1 + 1 + 1, but of letting go almost. Like letting go of 1 and having 0.
It's a movement within the 0. And the higher initiations that I talked about, that the Theosophists talked about, is the depth of that 0, which we can't really touch with the thinking, fragmented mind that is not whole. The mind that is not whole cannot even begin to grasp what that might be.
And can I also say that the few people I know that have attained that state have prolific creations. They write and they write and they write, and they teach and they teach and they teach, and whatever it is that they do, or they paint and they paint and they paint. Whatever it is that life is seeking a way of patterning itself through us individually, as an individuated expression that's not separate from anything. And so when that happens, when that state hits, then there's no block, there's no resistance to life flowing through this essence or this pattern in the way that it wants to flow through, and you can't stop it.
It's a freedom from resistance. It's a freedom from fear. And if even if you have little small fears, if you're not totally dominated by fears, but if you still have fears, the fears consume you. You have not the mind left to be really, really, truly creative. And yes.
Do you, sometimes when we talk, I know that cultures are really different. We've talked a lot about how, the things that from the Eastern culture, these are meditation and these kinds of thoughts are taught from a very early age and are a part of the culture. And then, say in a Western culture, that's not necessarily the case. But as I'm hearing this speaking, I'm wondering, okay, this is also partially developmental. Is it not?
When you say
Developmental meaning having to do with age, growing, and just coming to these. I know that there's going to be certain people, the Dalai Lama, people like that are born and will be that way always. But when there's developmental stages, and so my question would be, I would think that in our culture, going along these initiations are also going to deal with developmental stages in life as well. Is that also true in the Eastern cultures? Do you follow what I'm asking?
I don't understand.
She's saying that the stages
Thank
of
you.
the path are patterned after an age, like adolescence, young adulthood, you're gonna hit certain things at certain points. She's asking if you agree with that philosophy as for stages of the path.
The initiations are also coinciding with developmental stages in life as the age goes chronologically along.
There may be some parallel.
Mm-hmm.
As every life, there's certain ripening and letting go of things that the life teaches.
Right.
But as the actual initiation spans lifetimes,
Lifetimes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
and also it is taught that if you come back like a second or a third, you still have to kind of go through and recover your initiation.
And that happens developmentally.
And it happens developmentally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it can happen fast, though.
It happens very fast.
You
though.
bet it can. There are those certain people that it happens very fast.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, do we want to do the?
Yes, please.
We're right there.